So I've done some popular videos which people have looked at, liked, but asked for more information. One of them was called Win on Betting, which was about value betting. And that was the process of finding a price that's out of kilter with the market and then betting that to a profit. But of course, people were saying, well, how can you identify that something is mispriced? And I've also done football videos, predominantly trading videos, where I'm looking at certain things and the occurrence of those events. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to just merge those two videos together and give you something that allows you to at least make a stab or some sort of attempt at figuring out what the best price is in the market, and what that price should be and whether it represents value. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about pricing the correct score market in football. If you're interested in learning to trade on Betfair, then visit the BetAngel Academy, where you have detailed, structured Betfair trading courses. Or why not visit our website, where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional, but also visit the forum, where you can get detailed images, examples, and downloadable files. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon if you want notification of new videos as they're released. So, I have a strong heritage in football. Football is actually one of the sports that I understand better than pretty much anything else. And that is simply because that's where I started my entire betting and trading journey many years ago. If we wind back best part of 35 years or so now, that was where all of this, everything that has happened since sort of has come out of. I used to sit at home with my home computer, tip-tapping away, entering in data from a Rothman's yearbook, and that would allow me to start gathering information on football matches. And I sort of just did it out of interest, really. I used to watch a lot of football, used to play a lot of football, and I just sort of started entering the data and trying to figure out, how things happen from there. Part of the inspiration was my dad used to fill out the football balls coupon, but he used to do it randomly, and I thought, well, there has to be a better way. So I started gathering the data, sticking it into a database that I created, and trying to work out how those odds were formed in a football match and if I could do a better job than the bookmakers. And that led to me winning a first dividend on Littlewood's pools. So what you're about to see in this video is a simple summary of a model that I created some time ago. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm not going to say to you this is like absolutely definitely the way, because there are little things that you need to know about, the positives and negatives in terms of attempting to predict correct scores this way. So I'm going to insert that into the mix as we go through the video so you can fully understand. And obviously, in the time since I first started doing this to now, my knowledge has expanded significantly. I've got access to more data and stats, and I understand those little bumps and nuances quite well. The problem is I've got to try and get it into one video. So I'm going to give you a simplistic model here that will allow you to at least get to that first step. But also it will give you the hints and tips that you need to understand what you should be doing, why you should be doing it, and how to sort of get on to the next level. So I'll throw in a few of those things as we move through the video. So yeah, what is behind me? What are we looking at here in the background? Well, what we're looking at here is a database of 7,384 matches. Now, I have an absolutely enormous database of matches across different leagues, different countries, different competitions, different stages of those competitions, each one of them sort of tailored to be more specific to certain scenarios. Whereas this is a generic database. This is actually the English Football League and the English Premier League. I can't remember the exact details of what it is, but there are best part of 7,000 odd matches within here. But that's what it's modelling, that's what it's looking at within this data set. Across the top here you can see how many goals the away team has scored within a match, and on the left, on the y-axis, you can see how many teams the home team has scored within that particular match. So we can see if we go 0-0, you can see there were 640 matches that ended 0-0 in our sample set of 7,384 matches. And you can see a variety of different scores here. So the number of matches that ended up 4-2 was 69. And the number of matches that ended up 4-3 were 34 in that sample set. You can see it's quite a small percentage of all of those matches. And you can see most of the results were clustered over here at sort of nil, no goals, 1 goal or 2 goals. That's sort of where most of the football matches are clustered. So yeah, we've got the core numbers here. If you're using this seriously, then you would probably choose data sets specific to your need rather than a generic one. But we're going to use a generic one today to get across the concept for you. Incidentally, there is a lot more depth here as well. So, you know, it's possible for me to go to excruciatingly detailed level, but that would just take far too long. It may be something I do on the Academy at some point, but yeah, I digress. So here you can see I've converted the chance of a correct score into a percentage. So we can see here that the most common correct score within a market is 1-all. Home team tends to win more often than the away team, but that could be 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. But overall, if you're looking at forecasting a correct score, if you say 1-all, you'll get it right more frequently than you get it wrong. In terms of picking a correct score is what I'm talking about. So you can see here that the distribution of scores, and you can see a 1-0, 1-all is the most frequent, 1-0 is the second most likely score, 2-1 is the third most likely score, 2-0, and 0-0 comes in around that level as well, and then it's 1-0 to the away team. So you can see there's quite a tight cluster of matches at low scores that generally occur. So if I move my mouse across, what you can do is you can add up all of those individual results. So we've got here, and it's on the bottom of the screen here, but for the purposes of this video, I'll do it sort of out loud for you so you can understand what I'm looking at. So 10% plus 12% is 22%, plus we've got sort of another 9% here, 31. So can you see, if you add up all of these figures, that gives you, so if you were Dutching, for example, you can have a look at these stats, and it will identify sort of clusters of results that are likely. So that gives you a hint as to where you can actually add up all those things together. But yeah, you know, roughly speaking, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, sort of 56-ish, or thereabouts, early 50s, covers all of these scores, where the home team wins or the away team scores 1 goal. So yeah, you can play around with all of these numbers, and that gives you some sort of general feel for the way that a football match is likely to play out. So when you look at stats like this, you realise football is quite boring most of the time. There's not a great deal of interesting stuff going on in a football match a lot of the time. The scores are quite low typically. So how do we use this to actually predict a correct score? Because I've sort of said here, well, you know, 1-all is the most common score. But of course, some matches will have a strong home team, some will have a strong away team, and that will influence the outcome of it as well. But typically where you would start is by predicting the draw, because the draw is something that's relatively easy to sort of understand. So we've taken this data that we've got here, we've stripped out all of the home and away wins, and therefore we are left with a draw. And you can see that what I've done is I've taken away all of the numbers around everything other than the draw. So 12% of matches ended up 1-all, 8% 0-0, 2%, 5% were roughly 2-all, and you can see all of the data from here, and you can see it really thins out when we get beyond 5-all. I have seen a 5-all match, but in this particular data set there were none, and there was a 6-all in a Scottish league. Trying to remember what the match was, can't remember off the top of my head. So they do occur, they're just very, very infrequent. So if we look at this, we're basically saying that there are 5 ways that matches are typically drawn, and most of those are going to be 0-0 or 1-0 in the scheme of things. And there are a few 2-alls, and there are some 3-alls, which are quite rare, but beyond that it gets pretty thin. So you can see these numbers up here. I've actually replicated down here. I've just taken these numbers and dropped them down to this individual line. So you can see how that translates into what we're about to do next. So here you can see draw frequency, and that's what that I've obviously abbreviated it there. But so what is that talking about? Well, we've added up all of these draw figures here, and that equals 27.06%. So we're saying that 27.06% of matches end up in a draw. So what we're trying to work out is the percentage chance that if a match ends up as a draw, that it will be a certain type of draw. So what we're doing here, in fact, what I can do is use Excel to show this for you. There you go, a couple of arrows. We're basically taking this value and dividing it into that value. And the reason that we're doing that is we want to know how many, what chance is there of a draw occurring? We know that's 27%, but what chance of a draw occurring and it being 0-0? So if we divide that by that, 32% of draws end up 0-0, 45% end up 1-1, 18% 2-2, and then you can see it drops away from that particular point. So that moves us on to the next step. So in reality, the chance of a 1-1 draw across this entire data set should have produced odds of 8.19, 8.2 in decimal odds. So all I've done there is I've just converted the chance of something occurring into its specific set of odds. So because I typically use an exchange, we use decimal odds, we don't use fractional. So I've just done 1 divided by the chance, and that's where that number comes from. But basically we're converting the percentage chance of something happening into decimal odds that we can use to understand if there's value being created on the exchange or not. Now, of course, each individual match is different. So the chance of drawing one match or the home team winning or losing is going to vary quite dramatically from one match to the next. So how do we take account of that? Well, you can see what I've done on here is I have a thing that I've called market odds. So I've gone into a match just before I set up to record this video, and it was West Ham v Everton. So I'm looking at the West Ham v Everton match just above the camera here, and I can see that the draw odds are 3.55, so that represents a 28% chance of that match ending in a draw. So if we believe that the market is efficient, which it generally is, and certainly on an exchange, one of the reasons that we use exchange pricing is because it's much more efficient. The overall book percentage on the exchange here is 100.1. So it's basically saying that that's near perfect. There's no margin being lost to the other side of the book. I'm not going to explain the specifics about that, but basically the market's very, very efficient when we look at the market in this way. And therefore we're saying if the market is all-knowing and very efficient, and we assume that it's priced this correctly because I'm pricing it, other people are pricing it, we're all trying to get the perfect price, then the draw has a 28% chance of occurring within this particular match. So what we've done here is we're saying, well, the chance of a draw is slightly higher than the database set that we used. So how would that translate into the correct score within this particular match? So if we look at, we're looking at this data up here, we're looking at the chance of a draw being a certain type of draw, we're looking at the chance of a draw from the data set, and then we're comparing it to this particular match. These are the numbers that it pumps out. So again, we'll have a look and see what it's doing here. If we look at, I'm just trying to think, that hasn't really illustrated it particularly well, has it? But basically what we're doing is we're taking the chance of it being a certain type of draw, we're taking the odds that the draw is likely to occur from the match odds market within here, and then we're transposing the two, we're merging the two together to produce the new rating. So this is basically saying to us, you'll see this better when we look at the home win market in a second. So this is basically saying that from the database, the set of stats that we had, the odds should have been about 8, representing a 12% chance. We're saying here that it's nearer to a 13% chance of a draw on this particular match, and therefore the 1-1 draw should be coming in at about 7.86, just under 8 basically. Chance of a 0-0 is 11, 9% chance, or 11 in decimal odds. Chance of a 2-2 is about 5%, which would be 20 in decimal odds. So I'm going to go and have a quick look. I haven't looked at it yet, so this is going to surprise me, hopefully in a positive way, if I look at the set of odds. So we can see here, in fact, the draw is priced at 7.6 to 7.8, so we're almost spot on there. The 0-0 is 11, but on the actual market it's 14. So they're basically saying the chance of a 0-0 is slightly less than we have predicted. And if we look at a 2-2, what is a 2-2? A 2-2 is priced around 15, and we're saying 20. So we're saying that that's less likely. So they're saying that the chance of a 0-0 is less likely. The chance of 2-2 is a little bit more likely than we're saying. So basically, what this is where some of your skill and judgment as a trader, as a value bettor, and your model comes into play, because this is And there are much deeper layers to this as well, so don't forget that. So I'm giving you a top level here. I'm not saying to you that this is absolutely the way that you should do it, because there are many evolutions that you can take place from here in terms of the way that you model the market. But this is going to give you an idea of the way that the market is priced and how it's all interlinked and how you can start to derive stuff from there. So we're saying that we think the nil-nil should be 11.1, a 9% chance, but the market is saying it's 14. So it's saying that it's actually got less chance. So this is basically saying, in reality, that probably there are going to be slightly more goals in this match. This is what it's effectively saying, because the more goals you get in a match, the harder it is for them to be a draw. So if you've only got 2 goals in a match, you know, they could be shared equally. But if you've got 3 goals, they can't be shared equally. But also, maybe the home team's a little bit stronger, or maybe there's a propensity for more goals in this match than average. So that's where some of your skill and judgment comes into these sort of models, is to understand where the discrepancy is and why you think that discrepancy exists. But also, the core data set that you're using should be relevant to the match. And there are other layers as well, which I'm not going to go into now, because I could talk for days about specifics. I just want to give you a broad level to look at. So yeah, the 1-all is about right. We're a little bit short on the 0-0, and we're a little bit long on the 2-2. So you can make a judgment as to whether you think that's value or not, given this particular match. But what you would do is you'd step through each one of these stages. So the next stage would be basically to look at the home team. So the home team in this case is West Ham. I need to go back to the match odds and have a look at the match odds again and see where we're at. 262, yeah, that's correct in there. And if we look at the market itself, then we can go through the same process. We can basically say, you know, exclude the draw, exclude all of the results that end up with the away team winning, and just focus in on the correct scores that would have the home team winning. Add all of those value up. They come to 46.28%, is that correct? Yeah, I'm just looking to see, I'm just making sure we haven't got any errors here. So on our database, basically that's saying that the chance of the home team winning any of these particular scores is 46%. However, when we actually look at this match, we've entered in market odds here of 262, because that's what the exchange is telling us, that the chance of a match odds market, the chance of West Ham winning is 38% in the match odds market. So we've entered that. You can see that that's slightly lower than the average that we've seen on the database. So even that tells you something. That's saying that West Ham playing Everton, they've got a slightly lower chance than you would expect on average of a home team to win against an away team. Is that correct? Do you think that that's valid, given their league position, given the way that they're playing, all of those things? Is that a valid assumption to be made in this particular case? Because according to your database, your average home team wins 46% of the time, and yet the market is pricing West Ham a fair bit below that, sort of 8% below that particular value. So is that valid on this particular match? Because you could adjust your assumptions on that basis. Now, I've been following, I've been following West Ham this season. Not in that sense, but I've been following the results from West Ham, because West Ham have been throwing up some truly bizarre results this season. Very difficult to predict. So maybe you pass on this match and try another one. But West Ham seem very, very erratic this season. They're playing at home against a weaker team and they conspire to mess it up, and then they go away and play a decent team and they play pretty well. So again, this is something that you can throw into your model at some particular point. But again, you can see here the frequency with which a home team wins a match. 23% of the time they'll win it 1-0. 2-1 they'll win 20% of the time if they do win at home. So we're not saying that's the chance of them winning at home. We're saying if they do win at home, this is how the score of that particular match is distributed. So you can see basically here 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 2-0 all occur with a reasonable level of frequency, and that accounts for about 60% of, just over 60% of all of the results when a home team wins. So we can go through the same process again. We use the different assumptions that we've got here in terms of the chance that West Ham is slightly lower than the average that we see in our data set. And then you can see here that it's basically saying the chance of West Ham winning 1-0 is about 8.86%, or comes in around 11s. So I'm going to look at the correct score again. I've forgotten already what it was. So West Ham winning 1-0 is 11s. So that's pretty much nailed that. West Ham winning 2-1 is around 11s as well. So you can see we're slightly higher on that. So, maybe the 2-1, that tells you a little bit as well, because that's indicating again that perhaps the number of goals within this match is going to lead it to be skewed towards that end of the market. And if we look at 2-0, they're coming in around, the market is coming in around 18, so we're coming around 14, so we're a little bit shorter on that level. But this, you've got to remember, this is quite a simplistic model. So we're not looking at this model from the perspective of being absolutely perfect, and there are tweaks and refinements to be made. You can make those, you can position, and like I say, there are other levels that sit behind this. But the purpose of this video is really to give you an idea of how you would start to approach this problem. There are many variations within here. For example, we have yet to talk about the number of goals that we would expect within this particular match and comparing those. But that's another video that would last about half an hour just on its own. But as a consequence, you can see that we're beginning to form the basis of an opinion within the market. And we can do this all just by looking at the match odds. We don't have to look at historical data, historical results, trends, winning runs and streaks and all of that sort of stuff. What we're doing is we're looking at the match odds market, overlaying that on a much, much bigger database and saying, well, how does this match compare? And adjusting for the chance of the home team winning or the chance of the draw, how does that compare? And what sort of results would we expect to see in the long term? When you see those discrepancies appear, it's then that you have to decide why those discrepancies are there and what has caused those discrepancies. But also, probably you would want to refine this model as well if you're going to use it to really use any serious money. Because what you're attempting to do here is say, I'm right and the market's wrong. Whereas typically you would tend to assume that the market is right and that you're wrong. But nonetheless, this is a step along that path to allow you to start looking at the market, understanding the way that it's priced, and making a judgment on that particular point. So, whether you think that there's value there or not, or whether the market's wildly out based upon a range of different assumptions. So, one of the things that I do is I go back and look at specific matches. So I've got a database of all the matches and all the odds that were available, and then I start overlaying those as well, and then comparing what came out of those results just to see if that sort of fits. So there's an element of backfitting going on there. But what we're essentially trying to do is look at a market, make a judgment on what we think the price should be, and then make some assumptions and judgments from that particular point. And of course we can do this on the away team now. But one of the things that you'll find within football is all the markets are interlinked. They all look at one particular aspect of the market or the other. There are some core values that sit behind that. Again, that would be an entire video in itself. But nonetheless, those core values do drive all of the pricing that you see in the market, whether it's the both teams to score, over and unders, correct score, match odds. Any variation of all those are all linked into these data, and you can transpose the data, overlay it on existing data sets and start to contrast and compare to see if you can find some value or an opportunity within the market to do any type of betting or trading strategy. Anyhow, there's a simplistic overview of how to predict correct score odds. We use an existing database, put in specific data around this particular match, and then start looking at the market in a little bit greater depth from there. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that was useful. If you've got some comments, please leave them below. And if you liked this video and you thought it was helpful, then give me a big thumbs up, because in my database and in my mind, there's a million different things that I could talk about. But I rely upon you to tell me the stuff that you find interesting. So yeah, hope you found that interesting and hope that aids you whether you're betting or trading on football.